Next up, we will have the Office of District Attorney. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
How you doing?
Fine, thank you. Are we ready to proceed?
Good. You can please proceed.
Are you getting the clicker?
You have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, just about ready.
And you may want to pull the mic a little closer to you. Okay.
I think we're looking for the
Whenever you're ready.
clicker.
We're looking for the clicker for
That's
the...
okay.
I can begin. Just gonna sit there. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think
You ready?
we have a changing of the guard and ready to proceed.
No problem.
Thank you, President.
Welcome.
President
You're
Clark. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Kathleen Martin, and I'm First Assistant District Attorney and Chief of Staff at the District Attorney's Office. Sitting next to me is Deputy District Attorney Jody Lobel, and behind us in attendance today are many members of the District Attorney's Office, including the deputies of various divisions within the office, all of whom are available to help us in answering any questions you may have following the testimony. We appreciate the dedication to working collaboratively with all the criminal justice stakeholders as we try to make Philadelphia safer, provide a voice to victims of crime, and improve our criminal justice system. Despite the unwanted attention to our office that we have received as of late, and the associated challenges that follow, we wanted you to know that the day-to-day work of the office continues unabated. We have not slowed down. Our job continues to be to seek justice, to do the right thing for the right reasons, to give voice to the voiceless, to stand up for victims, and to work with our partners to help advise on and implement best practices. With each new initiative or continued reform, we try to improve efficiency and provide services to all the citizens of our communities in ways that are smart, proactive, and results-oriented. Our work continues with the same passion, commitment, and dedication to justice, just as it always has. You have our collective assurances that the exemplary work of the devoted staff of the District Attorney's Office continues. We have terrific employees in the office. They are overworked and underpaid, but they love what they do. And we love working with them, supervising them, and teaching them and watching their personal and professional growth. We all gain great satisfaction working to achieve justice and keep Philadelphia safer.
Good morning, Jody Lobel, Deputy District Attorney. As a result of the great work of the men and women of our office, we have a lot to be proud of. Simply supplying a list of the programs that we have implemented would not tell the story of the great results we have achieved, but we would like to highlight a few. Operationally, we have become better and more efficient in what we do. We divert more than 34%, in fact, close to 40% of our misdemeanor cases, which is twice what we diverted in 2010. These programs work. The recidivism rate for misdemeanor diversionary programs was just 16% after the first year of completion and 27% after 3 years. We charge fewer cases than we did years ago, approximately 1/4 fewer cases in 2016 than in 2010. Misdemeanors are resolved quickly. Between 2010 and 2016, the time for disposition decreased from 7 months to less than 4.5 months, and we continue to withdraw approximately 14% fewer cases during the same time period. Nearly 70% of felonies are held for court, which represents a nearly 10% increase since 2010. And through our Smart Room program, over 20% of our felony cases are disposed well before trial, representing a 3% increase since 2012. This program has allowed us to reduce continuances and avoid multiple listings and court appearances for defendants, victims, witnesses, and police. We are also proud that we have continued our role as a leading agency partner in the city's MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge grant effort. Indeed, over the past year, our office has participated in every aspect of the grant's strategic undertakings and has taken the lead on implementing several of the important programs and lending to their successes at all phases of the criminal justice process. I'd like to explain some innovative aspects of the noteworthy program supported by the MacArthur Grant. We helped to create the Early Resolution Program, which sought to resolve certain less violent cases quickly. Starting as early as preliminary arraignment, an assistant district attorney reviews cases for possible inclusion in the expanded Early Resolution Program. As part of MacArthur, our office agreed to expand the number and types of cases, including felonies, where a defendant receives an offer to resolve his or her case to a lower graded charge. This is significant for many reasons, including the fact that the collateral consequences of a felony conviction are far greater than those of a misdemeanor conviction. The theme of expansion continued into our diversion programming as well. Our office worked with the courts and the defense bar to increase eligibility for DUI offenders facing mandatory sentences. Most notably, the new plan recommends that 1-year mandatory DUI sentences be completed by serving only 3 months in prison. Previously, the agreed-to plan provided for 6 months incarceration. The remainder of the sentence is served on house arrest. Another diversion program benefiting from MacArthur is the successful The Choice Is Yours, or TCY program. As a result of funds received from this grant, we were able to expand the types of cases eligible for TCY. We already have exceeded our target number of referrals into this felony diversion program for young adult offenders who sell drugs. You will recall us talking about this innovative program that provides pre-entry services, such as life skills training, to those who could be convicted of selling lower amounts of illegal drugs. It is truly innovative and is focused on reducing the likelihood of the individual's potential recidivism by addressing his or her criminogenic needs. It is intensive and has yielded excellent results. 154 graduates, 56 of whom were in 2016, 88% successful graduation rate, recidivism rate of less than 17%, which is an impressive percentage considering that the recidivism rate for this population not enrolled in the program is at least 30%. We have enrolled 54 new participants in 2016. Additionally, the office has worked collaboratively with, among others, the Probation Department and the Defenders Association throughout the year to reduce the size of our county prison population by focusing on offenders who are detained because of probation violations. By creating the Detainer Alternative Program, or DAP, we have taken an important first step by identifying substance abusers who continue to test positive for drugs while on probation. Instead of merely taking them into custody, usually for technical violations like positive drug tests, we are giving them the tools and resources to address their addiction from outside the prison walls. More generally, for those individuals who reoffend while on probation, we have worked closely with the Defenders Association to address these new cases in an expedited manner. Under the ARC program, defendants with open cases plead guilty in front of their probation judge or a judge who is the first to sentence them in the open case. This procedure creates greater efficiency, resulting in defendants resolving their cases more than twice as fast as before. Often, this means fewer prison beds being used to house individuals pending disposition of their cases. The grant is also permitting us to address issues regarding racial and socioeconomic inequities. Specifically, through early bail review initiative, we have committed to reviewing bail cases in which a defendant has been unable to post $50,000 or less of bail. In short, the significant amount of collaborative work we have undertaken with the MacArthur Grant has been incredibly impactful, and we look forward to helping continue in its successes.
We also wanted to discuss the opioid and heroin crisis. As you know, the heroin and opioid crisis has taken great hold here in Philadelphia, as it has in many other communities across Pennsylvania and nationally. There were approximately 900 drug overdoses last year, opioids being involved in approximately 80% of those deaths. In 2013, the number of drug overdoses in Philadelphia was far less, approximately 460. The District Attorney's Office is doing our part. We have collected nearly 1 ton of prescription drugs through our medical drop boxes, which are stationed in each police district. We helped secure funding of $100,000 with the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association for Narcan, the life-saving antidote for those overdosing from heroin. We are instrumental in the enactment of a few years ago of legislation creating Pennsylvania's prescription drug database, which helped to reduce prescription drug abuse and the illegal diversion of these drugs, and in more recent legislation requiring doctors to access the database whenever they prescribe an opioid. It is clear that we cannot arrest our way out of the heroin crisis. Nonetheless, we in the District Attorney's Office have an important responsibility to hold major dealers accountable. Prison is meant for those who profit from the poison they sell on our streets and to our children. But addicts need treatment, and unfortunately, treatment is not always available. We must redouble our efforts to ensure that sufficient treatment beds are available. The Mayor's proposal to provide significant funding for Narcan, to work with doctors to avoid the overprescribing of drugs, and to track the openings of addiction treatment facilities are appropriate, and if implemented, should have a meaningful, positive impact. We also, in the District Attorney's Office, continue to work tirelessly to reduce gun violence. Our focused deterrence program, in which we work to overcome gun violence in South Philadelphia, continues to yield positive results. The message is widely disseminated in South Philadelphia through law enforcement and our community partners. Providing social services and engaging in community outreach is essential to the focused deterrence strategy. As of 2016, we've had 6 call-in meetings in which over 200 gang members have heard the message to stop the violence, and we have offered social services to those members. We believe that the program can be expanded to other parts of Philadelphia. Such an expansion, however, must be done in cooperation with the police department and the other stakeholders, including social services. This would require funding, since focused deterrence requires staffing, intelligence gathering, and social services.
While focused deterrence is one of our most successful programs, it is not the solution to all of our serious crime concerns. We continue to experience unacceptable levels of gun violence. We cannot ignore the numbers. There are dangerous offenders committing horrific crimes with firearms, such as robbery, home invasion burglaries, drug trafficking, sexual assaults, and murder. The trends are ominous. As of the end of April, homicides are up by 18%. As of this morning, we have 105 homicide cases compared to 89 at the same time last year, again an increase of 18%. In 2017, through April 30th, we had 365 shootings and 103 homicides, compared to just 2 years before, in 2015, when we had 264 shootings and 68 homicides. That's an increase of 101 shootings and 35 homicides in those 2 years' statistics. Each of these cases has victims, families torn apart, communities reeling, and Philadelphians fearful to leave their homes. The challenge of bringing these perpetrators to justice is exacerbated by witness intimidation and the unfortunate reluctance by some to cooperate with law enforcement. These are not excuses, but rather remain our challenges moving forward. Criminal justice reform is important and necessary, but reform is far-reaching and is meant to make things better at all levels of the system. Let's not forget that we live in a city where gun violence is at an intolerable level, and the trends should concern us. We must increase our funding and programming to decry violence on our streets, curtail witness intimidation, and enhance witness safety. Shootings at the end of 2016 should not be at one of their highest points in the last 5 years. Our focus on community engagement has taken our staff to over 150 community meetings and events in 2016. Whether assigned to geographic zones in our trial division or to other divisions in the office, our personnel is public service oriented and takes this responsibility seriously. We speak at public schools. We participate in days of service, cleanup days, tree planting days. We attend community meetings, PDAC and business associations. We present anti-bullying and safety messages across the city. We work with our seniors. We are invited to career days, fairs, victims' rights symposiums, and town hall meetings. Our consistent interactions with the citizens of our city help them to understand our role in the justice system and to do what we can to provide outreach, information, and a positive presence in our community. We also continue to make incredible strides to reduce juvenile adjudications. In the early 2000s, we filed nearly 12,000 juvenile delinquency petitions, which is, strike that, sorry. I'm in court. Strike that. In 2016, that number has reduced drastically to 2158. That is a reduction of 82%. Further, this is a reduction of almost 200 petitions from 2015. The number of instances in which we charge a juvenile as an adult has dramatically reduced as well, from approximately 1,200 cases in the early 2000s to fewer than 200 now. We had 197 DFJs filed last year, which is an 83% reduction from the early 2000s.
Additionally, because our mission is to ensure that what we do is correct and just, our conviction review unit has expanded, a reboot, so to say. It now consists of a staff of 3, including 2 attorneys, a paralegal, and the use of a detective. The unit was created and expanded without the benefit of additional fundings, because our office is committed to doing the right thing at every stage of every proceeding. And using our own funds for that was important to do at that time. The unit remains independent within the office, but the office as a whole is committed to doing the review that is necessary to continue the mission of the office. And if you're going to ask what is the success or the metrics performance of the conviction review, just since January we've had 150 submissions from the individuals in custody or their attorneys and reviewing them at a rapid rate. We've opened 50 files for more extensive review. The success of this unit can be measured not only by exoneration, but by the number of files reviewed.
The role of a prosecutor and a prosecutor's office is so much more than it was a decade ago, and we are proud of our reforms and our results. We charge fewer crimes than we did in the past, divert more nonviolent and less violent offenders, have been instrumental in helping to reduce the size of our prison population, continue to be innovative with regard to gun crimes, and encourage appropriate expungements. We have revised our charging practices to charge the right cases and have attained a higher conviction rate on these cases, coupled with a shorter amount of time to resolve them. That is good for victims and witnesses and for the system as a whole. Diversion and more efficient disposition of cases yields significant cost savings to the city. Each program saves taxpayer dollars.
Excuse me. This is not testimony that was submitted. Is this testimony that your office had submitted to us earlier?
It's an expansion of what we submitted to give more detail to the council members
Okay.
present.
Significant expansion. I'm just wondering, because we're looking for your testimony and it's not reflected based on what you're talking about. Okay. Can you make sure we get that
Certainly.
copies of that testimony?
Will do.
All right.
By resolving cases faster in our smart rooms, the cost savings to the city are approximately $1 million annually. Our extremely robust accelerated misdemeanor program is estimated to produce annual savings of more than $3 million. The successes of the programs created under the MacArthur Grant will yield significant savings by reducing the size of the jail population. We emphatically believe that some form of justice reinvestment should be implemented so that the agencies and entities that become more efficient and ultimately use their resources to save the city significant amounts of money can, at a minimum, receive back a portion of their own costs in staffing the programs that led to the efficiencies. We are also doing more internally. We have recently expanded training for our entry-level prosecutors. Training involves a significant time commitment by members of our senior staff, but it is well worth it, helping to ensure courtroom lawyers who are prepared and professional, and ultimately to retain them in the long run.
This year's budget proposal adequately funds our office. Specifically, it provides for $37,810,487, which is roughly 92% of this amount is attributable to salary costs. Of course, we could do much more with additional funding. We could upgrade our case management system. An enhanced system would allow us to effectively implement performance measuring tools and move us towards being less dependent on paper files. Additionally, it would help us prepare for performance-based budgeting in the future. We could better afford to utilize technology in the courtroom. Likely next fiscal year, we will need additional funding related to body-worn cameras. We have already witnessed an increased volume of discovery, which affects our staffing requirements in terms of processing, transferring, retaining, and storing videos. As the city implements the use of body-worn cameras throughout all of the police department, our staffing levels need to be increased to meet the demand in terms of reviewing the videos and determining what can be given to the requester, that which cannot, and that which must be redacted. These efforts will require a significant amount of time. But we are pleased to report that the Mayor's Office continues to work closely with us and, like you, is mindful of our budgetary needs. As an example, the Mayor's Office recently helped to facilitate implementation of a much-needed new phone system in the District Attorney's Office. Our most pressing budgetary need is to slow down our rate of attrition. In our trial division, more than 53% of our prosecutors have less than 5 years' experience. This means that the more experienced attorneys are leaving at a rapid rate. In fiscal year 17 to date, 62% of our attorneys with more than 8 years' experience have left the office. The more experienced attorneys who are better able to make strategic decisions have left the office. The Defenders Association will likely make a similar point about their staff attrition, as may the City Solicitor's Office. With regard to the District Attorney's Office, the reason why someone leaves is sadly predictable. The person loves his or her job and wants to stay, but simply cannot afford to do so. Absent meaningful and predictable salary increases, this problem will persist.
Lastly, we wanted to take a few minutes to discuss the issue of parity. We understand the request of the Public Defender's Office to have parity with the District Attorney's Office. We do not oppose parity as a concept and believe it is entirely appropriate to ensure meaningful and accurate parity among criminal justice agencies. We believe there should be a rigorous parity analysis, and we will be happy to participate in such an analysis. While that is not a simple, easy, or quick task, a parity analysis will, we believe, provide appropriate detail to help you and the Mayor's Office make informed, data-driven budgetary decisions in the years going forward. I'd like to introduce my colleague Greg Rowe, Chief of the Legislation Unit, who would take the lead now in discussing an analytical framework for indigent defense parity.
So on the next slide, we only have a couple of slides on this, but the next slide indicates really what our framework that we believe would start with, which would be a rigorous caseload analysis. That's the bread and butter of what we do, of what the defenders do is cases. So,
She didn't hear your name.
I'm sorry, Greg, G-R-E-G, Rowe, R-O-W-E. I'm Chief of the Legislation and Policy Unit.
Thank you.
I apologize for not saying that earlier. So what we would propose as we all go through this analysis is to identify the numbers of cases that each of our offices handles, the type of case, and to assign a value to the case. Homicides are complex, long, exhaustive cases. On the slide there, we assign 10 points. That's an arbitrary number, but just to show that a homicide takes more than, say, a drug possession or a retail theft case. So we believe that's the first analytical point that should be examined. On the next slide, we would suggest that you look at what does each office handle in terms of how far does the representation go. If it's a jury trial, that takes longer. That takes more resources. That takes more time. If it's a guilty plea, that still takes time, but not as much as a jury trial. But if you go just to a preliminary hearing or a preliminary arraignment, that's going to be somewhat less. So the analysis should take into account those factors as well. And then in the next slide, we'd have to consider appeals, post-conviction petitions, and responses also. Moving through the slides, the next one, and really the next two are we got to account for the uniquenesses of each office. There are budgetary factors that we have to account for, and there are budgetary factors that the Defender's Office has to account for. These lists are by no means exhaustive. It's just a way to say we after we do caseload analysis, we then have to look. We have victim services that we do. We have to do discovery. The Defender's Office has to cover its lease. They have to cover personnel benefits. So there's a lot, but sort of going through in a rigorous, linear manner, we think would provide just a very accurate representation for ultimately getting to that parity question, which has been an issue over the last couple of years.
And that is by no means to say that we don't agree that all justice partners deserve parity. We're just presenting a formula that can start the process of the talks to engage to make that happen. Finally, thank you, Council President Clark, Jones, Johnson, everyone here. On behalf of the almost 600 employees of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, we thank you for your consideration today and your ongoing commitment to make Philadelphia a safer and more productive place for its citizens.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Quick question.
Yes.
Closure rate on homicides. What's our closure rate on homicides? 'Cause I've been hearing that term thrown out there lately. I guess we're in the political season, so people are talking about closure rate. Yeah.
Closure rate for homicides currently is 45%.
45%.
Yes, sir.
So how do you measure that? Because my assumption is that homicide, the case never closes. There's no statute of limitations. So how do we measure the rate if it's always an open-ended investigation? I mean, I understand what they call cold cases. You know, I watch that Law and Order stuff. And they say cold cases, not as many resources are devoted to a case as it gets older, but
I agree. There's
how do you measure
victims out there who, if their case is not cleared or closed, would have the continuing pain. But I can call Deputy of our Trial Division, John Delaney, up for a more precise answer.
all right.
Morning, Mr. President.
Morning.
I think you may
Just
be
to say your name for the record. Yes.
John P. as in Patrick Delaney, D-E-L-A-N-E-Y, Jr. I think you may be referring to the clearance rate,
Clearance rate, I'm sorry.
not the closure
All
rate.
right, I'm sorry.
And the clearance rate measures for each homicide, was there either an arrest or a decision made by our office that there will be no arrest. For example, if the suspected killer is himself killed, we will authorize the police department to exceptionally clear that case. So it doesn't count as open any longer.
Okay.
But the clearance rate currently is about 45%, meaning of every 100 homicides, 45 of them result in arrest or some other definitive decision.
Okay. All right, that's what I meant, but let's use the wrong term. So when you say clearance rate, it just references the status of the case, not necessarily the fact that this person will never, that case will never be resolved.
That's correct.
Because when you hear as a layperson somebody saying, well, you mean to tell me that more than 50% of these people that kill somebody are going to walk away scot-free? And that's real problematic to the average person when you hear that.
No, you're correct. It's a shorthand way of saying the investigation is open or closed. And for the investigations that remain open that are not cleared, they continue.
All right, so why do we use that term? Because it's a term that, I'm trying to think, I'm not a criminal, think I don't go around shooting people. But if you're like a person that reached the level of desperation, you say, you know what, I shoot somebody, I got a 50% chance that I may not get caught.
The conventional, I understand the concern. The conventional wisdom is the higher the clearance rate, the more efficient and the more productive the investigations into those crimes. And there are multiple reasons why the clearance rate waxes and wanes.
Well, that was my next question. What would you say is, and I know there's a lot of people involved in investigation police, what do you think the most significant issue is in terms of us not being able to get our rate up significantly?
I would suggest to you that this is something that we prosecutors don't like to admit, but without people, we are powerless. Without people, we are powerless. Correct. So if people don't come forward and tell us what they saw or what they heard or even what they suspect, because oftentimes they can give us the one piece of information that will lead us to something that can result in closing a case by arrest, for example.
Right.
But it's people being intimidated or people being reluctant for other reasons to share their information with us in the first instance, and then if they do share their information, to participate in the investigation or the prosecution. Okay. Because it requires a significant amount of courage for someone to come forward and say, I know there's a bad guy in my neighborhood. He's so bad he killed somebody, yet I'm willing to stand up in a public place in front of him and his lawyer and say that he did it. Right.
How much latitude do you have in terms of charging an individual for witness intimidation? Because, I live in North Philly, so I understand some of the challenges and people's unwillingness to, as they call it on the street, snitch, right? There has to be a deterrent, I guess, for individuals to intimidate a witness, and also making a person feel comfortable that if, one, they do give information that can assist the case, and two, when they make the 911 call, nobody's going to come knocking on the door and say, "Did you call?" Because that's the belief of a lot of people, and then the district attorney's office interviewing the person, and it gets out. What do we need to do what's your recommendation on how we need to?
Well, I think like most problems, it demands a multi-pronged approach. To answer your first question, our charging standard doesn't vary based on the crime. It's, do we have sufficient evidence to prove somebody beyond a reasonable doubt committed a crime? That's true for witness intimidation, it's true for murder, it's true for retail theft. In terms of witness intimidation, there are a number of things that we can do and are doing. One is to assure people, despite the common wisdom, it happens rarely. It happens far too frequently than it should, but it's a relatively rare occurrence. That's number one. Number two, if somebody is willing to come forward, we have the resources, thanks to the city and the state budget, to relocate people. If somebody tells us today that they're a witness in a serious crime and they face a serious imminent threat, we can remove them from their house today, put them somewhere temporarily, and help them find a permanent place to relocate to.
All right, that's the key point, the permanent place, because the temporary nature of what the belief is problematic. So you're saying, is that depending on the type of case, the permanency of the relocation, or is it?
No. Once we decide that we're going to relocate somebody, we commit to temporarily relocating them for months, and in helping them relocate to a permanent place. The difficulty for the citizen who wants to do this is they have to agree never to go back to the neighborhood that we, with their input, define as the danger zone.
Right.
And I was, to add to your original question about what are we doing about witness intimidation, there are a number of things that are going on. Part of it is our immersion in the community. Kathy and Jody talked about our community engagement. The more that people recognize that we're not foreigners, we're Philadelphians just like them. We live in their neighborhoods. We want them to be safe, and that the only time they see us shouldn't be when there's a crisis, when they have to come and testify about somebody getting shot. The other thing I would cite too is what President Judge Wood Skipper described in her testimony, and that is the suppression of the use of cell phones in the courthouse. Because if we can't protect people when they're testifying, there's no chance we're going to protect them when they're home.
Okay. All right. That's a problem. One other question. On your testimony on page 4, according to, I guess it's a chart, your participation rate as it relates to contracts is 0%. It has been since FY12. Thank you, sir, for your response.
Yes,
appreciate it. What is that all about? Is that a typographical area? I mean, you'd have to go out of your way to have 0 contracts for participation.
If I may, our Chief Financial Officer, Doreen Rooney.
All right.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
One thing I do want to explain is beginning in fiscal year 17, this current fiscal year, is when we began contracting through the city's contracting process. Prior to that, we were not involved in the city's ACES contracting process and didn't have that, the recommendations for the participation rates. The majority of our contracts are also victim services contracts, where there's only one entity in the city that can provide the particular services needed. And with that being said, during this process this year, moving on to the city's contracting process, the city has recognized that and has made us exempt in those particular contracts. So there wouldn't even be an eligibility rate for those.
Give me an example.
So Concealia
Where there's
Road.
only one.
Or there's Victim Services of South Philadelphia. So that is the only agency in that particular area of the city that can fulfill the requirements of what we need for those services. So given that there is no competition, it would be impractical to say, well, you have to have a certain participation level if there's no other service provider that would be available to us.
So is that, give me some, just briefly, I'm just trying to understand how you have like 0%.
So
It's like,
well, 0% is because it can't be applicable if there is no, normally that's something there you want to achieve during a bidding process. But if
Okay.
there is no bidding process for certain unique contracts, then it isn't applicable.
so all your contracts are like that?
Well,
There's
that-
like no so like we have contracts here. I mean, we're not in your type of business, but, we purchase materials, we purchase things. You don't do that at the DA's office?
We generally do not. The majority of our contracts, as I said, are the victim services contracts. So this requirement would not be applicable there because they're not going through that type of bidding process you would with services or products. Another one of our very large contracts is with a company called DrugScan that does expert testimony in court for us. The police department contracts with DrugScan to actually perform the analysis. So we basically have to contract with the same company because they're providing testimony on the work that they performed during the analysis. So the police department is going through the bidding process to identify and procure DrugScan. We are obligated to also use DrugScan, and therefore, again, it's not applicable in that instance for the participation rate. This fall, we are just beginning to do an RFP for some of our services that would apply, and we would require the participation level, and that's our computer systems, something that actually can be bid upon, that various entities would have the capability to provide services. So beginning in 17, we will have participation levels for those contracts.
Okay. All right. Do we have access to all of the contracts that have been let directly from the DA's office over the prior years? In case I wanted to go back and check. Not that I don't believe you, but.
Prior to
Zero?
prior to this fiscal year, city finance would still have it. It wouldn't have gone
Fine.
through the whole ASA system, but we would have sent it through as encumbrance documents, and the contracts would be
Okay.
included with those.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sure.
Just as clarity on the contract services that you're talking about, I happen to be, for a short period of time, a member of Northeast Victim Services, so I understand a little bit about it. Can you explain victim services, and how many victim services do you have around the city of Philadelphia? Because I don't know much about that kind of contracting, as opposed to when we think of contract, at least the way I think of contracting here in the city of Philadelphia, we think of some sort of professional services, and whether it's a law firm for conflict counsel, or whether it's a management firm for software, or some kind of purchasing, those kinds of contracts. I think victim services and those kinds of services are a little bit different. I really don't know. They're more community-based, collaborative with some of our local law enforcement and members of the community. So just for clarity, could you explain what a victim services is to City Council, and how many do we have here in the city? Because I think that'll, at least in my mind, I just don't want things to get confused on how a victim services is created, because I actually don't know the answer to that either.
All right, but I thought you said it was only one.
I gave you an example of, say, the South Philly. I said the majority of our contracts are victim services, and they
All right.
are community-based.
So there's none in North Philly and none in West Philly, in
There
the
are.
areas that,
There are.
and none of those entities have any minority participation.
All
I
of
was trying to
this-
let you, I was trying to move on, but now
It's-
Councilman is brought. So if you got them all over in different neighborhoods, I don't understand why there's no victim services in those areas where extremely predominantly minority.
It's that there wasn't a participation level assigned to it. I don't want to say that they are not represented by different minorities within each. In fact, previous testimony that we submitted in prior years would note whether the director, what ethnicity they were. We did include other information, but there wasn't the participation level that's mandated by the OEO for these particular.
Don't you know who they are? You don't need OEO to tell you if you contract with that organization, you kind of have a sense of who that organization is. You don't need OEO to tell you.
The template, our understanding of the template was to put in the OEO participation rates that were assigned during the bidding process. It wasn't.
Okay. I don't think we use OEO, right? We just kind of know who we deal with as a separate department like you are. So I don't need OEO to tell me if the contracting opportunity.
So if our understanding was wrong, we can go back and put in the levels. I want to
Yeah,
understand.
you may want to revise this, because this is not
Okay.
a good look, in all honesty.
Okay. We
And I'm
can
fine with
definitely
this.
do that.
Yeah, please.
I would want to understand too what you're looking for the level, if it's the executive director of the agency or if it's the composition of the employees that are doing the services.
Well, I'm saying if you have you contract with a company, and participation in the people within that company, what the demographics.
Okay.
So that would, to come in here with a zero participation, is this not a good look for you?
We can
for the
make the
DA's office?
revisions.
All right,
Yeah, we'll definitely do that, Council President.
thank you.
Administrative type of information request that you might be able to gather and then report back to the council president. I'm not sure again on victim services, specifically how they were contracted and how competitive it is. I really don't understand that much, but I do know that there is diversity amongst them throughout the city of Philadelphia. So
We might not have the
I think
numbers.
it's being confused. But if you could just make phone calls to all your executive directors and say, hey, give me a report of your employees and your participation on the board. That would be helpful and would shed a little better light on some of the lines of questioning here.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Councilman, tee back up, because your name came off. When you got a point of order your name came off the screen. So if you want to tee up for a later question. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. I want to ask a couple questions regarding, obviously, the issue of youth gun violence. And I noticed part of the presentation talked about a significant focus on the opioid and heroin epidemic. But I'm one to believe that I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and we've been dealing with the epidemic of youth gun violence since I've started back in 1998. And so I want to go down the path of just getting an understanding. And I know you're going through a transition, and so I kind of feel like these questions I'm going to be asking, I'm going to be addressing with whoever's going to be the next district attorney, but at the end of the day, it's the staff that keeps the engine moving forward. So I respect all of you for the work that y'all are doing and moving the institution forward. One, focused deterrent, because obviously it's primarily focused in the 2nd Councilmanic District as a pilot program. Do you have any measurable goals from the social service impact? I know we've done the call-outs, I participated. Do we have the measurable goals in terms of the services provided to the young men who are participating in focused deterrence, who might have been diverted from engaging in a life of crime and violence? So that's GED, that's getting a job. That's one part. And also, I'm sure you're aware that, or if you weren't aware, that there is no increase, or there wasn't an increase submitted from the district attorney's office or the mayor's office for focused deterrence. And I talked to the administration about this because it was expressed from the administration side that there was a commitment to address this issue. But for me, if we don't see the increase in the budget, then that's non-reflective. And the response we got was, we were waiting for the next district attorney. But however, I believe that the second floor sets the tone, because obviously they're going to have to come here to get the budget anyway. But can you elaborate on why there wasn't a proposal for an increase?
The partners, the initial partners, had a conversation with Commissioner Ross about focused deterrence, and we all sat down and sort of decided that, yes, we're willing to participate because the council has expressed a desire. You know, everyone wants it in their councilmanic district. So we're willing to move forward in the right area. One area of the city was identified, maybe make it a smaller area than all of South Philly that was identified previously. And we have identified, based on the rollout of when that would happen, we're not sure yet how large it will be and the timing of that, what we will need to move forward. So as I said in my testimony, there may be a need for one additional DA who can track and monitor the bail increases, monitor the individuals who are the subjects of the focused deterrence. But we have not submitted anything because we're unaware of, at the present, when that will be and what it entails.
So you're just
how
in a
big it will
holding
be.
pattern in terms of the amount of money you think you would
Well,
need?
we think
to
we
move
can
forward?
begin to work it as we are right now.
Without an increase in funding?
Because we don't know how big it will be.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to get some clarity on that. And then two, are we still engaging, I recently did a press conference with State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, because we also had an illegal gun task force, worked in partnership with the former district attorney, Lynn Abram, and also the former AG at that particular time. I think it might have been Corbett at that time. And we've received a significant amount of money to go after those individuals who fled the streets of Philadelphia with their illegal guns. And so we do have a budget request to Governor Wolf to restore it from 3.8 to 5 million. Also been in contact with the current Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, about supporting this initiative. Can you give us an update on where the District Attorney's Office is in terms of the illegal gun task force, and how are we going after those who are selling the guns, carrying the guns? These guys sell heroin, they sell opioids, so you go after them. What are we doing to go after the people? Because I always like to say there's no Uzis made in Point Breeze or Strawberry Mansion. They're coming from somewhere. And Councilman Jones and I were talking about last week how in Chester, they just did a press conference, caught this guy selling a trunk full of guns. Like, where's that enthusiasm to go after the guys that's terrorizing our neighborhoods? And I don't even hear it in the current debates. I think everybody that's running wants to be a reformer, but they forget there's a victim out there. There's a mom whose funeral I have to console when I'm always going to a funeral every week. There's the other side of the conversation in a reform movement when you talk about neighborhoods being terrorized. And so can you give us an overview on where we're at from that aspect? Because our city is being ravaged by people carrying guns and murdering people.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging what's on everyone in the district attorney's office mind, that there are still victims for all these crimes, and that they need to be acknowledged and their voice needs to get heard. Regarding gun violence, the Gun Violence Task Force, made in cooperation and run in cooperation with the Attorney General's office in Philadelphia, is run out of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. We have a number of DAs who are dedicated to that. And the Deputy of Gun Violence Task Force is here, Ann Ponterio, and she can address some of the specifics of what they're going for regarding PICS denials, the gun shows that they're going. The agents are fantastic on getting on
Y'all
them
go
to
to
try
gun shows?
Yes, the gun shows.
Yes. Ann Ponterio, that's A-N-N, Ponterio, P as in Peter, O-N-T-E-R-I-O, Deputy District Attorney. Good afternoon, Councilman. With the Gun Violence Task Force, we currently have 18 agents and 3 supervisors, and we have staffing of analysts, paralegals, and prosecutors. And we work together so to not only do what you say, find the people who are selling the guns or giving illegal transfers to those in Philadelphia. So what we do is we do multiple things. We work with the ATF, okay? We work with state parole, and we work with the Pennsylvania State Police. And as our first assistant said to you, we work with gun shops and gun shows. Gun shops in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, and also gun shows. We have gun shows twice a year, approximately, in Philadelphia, and we have a number of them in Oaks. Gun shows, which are in Montgomery County. And what we do is I don't want to tell you all the things that we're doing to do that, but we do go to those gun shows. We do have relationships with those gun shop owners, so that when they know something suspicious, they notify us. And then we take it from there and we investigate. We also look at every single gun case in Philadelphia. The agents look at every single gun case and try to track where that gun came from. And we look at also all lost reports of guns, because we try to make a connection too with that. So those are some of the efforts that we're doing right now so that we can figure out how these guns are getting to these individuals' hands in Philadelphia and do something about it.
Are we still utilizing GunStat?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a young person, I never, ever thought I would be saying this to the district attorney's office. It's just not,
We
this defies.
can't wait to hear this.
No. The ultimate measure of a man or a woman is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy. And that's a quote from Martin Luther King. I never, ever, ever, ever thought I would say that to you, but it is truly appropriate for the professional men and women of the district attorney's office. And my point to you is keep your head up. People know the difference between someone who may have had a bad day and a bad department. I want you to know that. I've worked with individuals on day reporting trips. I've worked with you on PCCD. I've worked with you in trying to figure out GunStat and data-driven processes to deploy limited resources. So I want you to know we get it. And we value you as professionals and want to work with you as such. As a kid, I never wanted to see a DA, but as a grown man that is more probable to be a victim, I'm glad you're there. I have to deal with not just the victims of crime, the perpetrators and safeguarding their rights, but some of the victims. I go to way too many teddy bear memorials where mothers and sometimes fathers are like throwing their hands up like, how do we stop this? How do we prevent this? And often in that answer, the solution is you. So I want you to keep your heads up. The sun will come out tomorrow, all those kind of things. And if it depends in part on you. So we want you to keep working with us. I mentioned to the courts earlier that the CJAB is an important part of some of the positive outcomes that we've seen as it relates to justice reform. I want you to also understand that you're an integral part of that CJAB. So when something affects one end, it affects the other, and we appreciate that. So with all the accolades aside, I'll say I didn't give them to you because you deserve them. Some of the challenges that we see in the community, we have got to get better at some things. The president and I fought for more dollars for witness relocation. Tell me where that is. Without witnesses, there is no justice. So we got to figure out how we're doing with that. I'm concerned about the difference between closure, conviction. Once you get somebody to trial, what is your conviction rate? So I understand closure can mean both perpetrator and defendant have resolved things or whatever. But once you get the bad person in the courtroom, what is your conviction rate?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Everyone at the District Attorney's Office appreciates your acknowledgement of the distractions that are there for us, but we are here to tell you that nothing will distract us from doing our jobs and seeking justice. Every day we go into those courtrooms in the CJC, and that's what we do, and we will continue to do so. Regarding CJAB, we agree that getting out of our individual silos is so important so that we can come together as a community for the betterment, and talking with each other and re-engaging and engaging in that conversation is ultimately necessary. Currently, our conviction rate is 70%. Regarding witness relocation and witness funds, we appreciate all that you did years ago to get us additional money. Currently, the Attorney General's Office also supplies money for witness relocation and witness fees. In fiscal year 16 from the Attorney General's Office, we spent $157,000. Fiscal year 17 to date, it's currently $91,000. But from the budget from the city, in fiscal year 17, we've spent from the money that you were able to provide to us $109,000, and in 16, $9,000. And that's in relocation. As regarding witness fees, currently to date, for the money from the city and with your help, $87,000, and in fiscal year 16, $118,000. So with the requirements for each and when it can be used together from the money from the state and from you, we are able to relocate and give safety and security to the number of witnesses who do come forward, and we appreciate it.
Rough round figure.
We don't typically say the numbers. I can happily say it,
Then I don't want to know. No, I don't want to know.
If I'm able to, I'll talk to you privately about that.
So I would like for us to kind of focus on how you are helping us reduce in this justice reform some of the charges unnecessarily. And where are you on bail reform?
Well, I don't think the DA's office charges anything unnecessarily, but I can go to Ms. Lobel for the history of how charging used to be and what reforms we have done and continue to do. And we're always willing to look at everything again and then answer your second question.
Well, with regard to bail reform, we're certainly always involved in initiatives, and as I stated in my testimony on behalf of the office, we are really joining MacArthur in trying to expand any initiatives that we currently have. Our early bail review has been really helpful among the other programs that we've started. I'm sorry, I can't remember what your first question was.
Where are you?
Just bail reform, just continue bail reform. Okay, so that is an issue close to my heart. I could sit here and talk about bail reform all day, and I'm very pleased that in the past 5 years, we finally got it on the map. It started with the charging initiatives years ago, where we took experienced people, as you know, we put them in the charging unit, and we tried to make sure that there was sufficient evidence to sustain the charges. We do have an initiative now that does look at early resolution of cases by reducing the charges, which encourages people to maybe have shorter incarceration periods or shorter probationary periods or divert them to services. especially in areas of drug cases. We're looking at addiction and drug usage more as a health problem or a social problem than necessarily treating somebody as a criminal. We're always looking for more beds. We're always looking for more ways to get people out of the traditional path of prosecution that leads to incarceration and giving them other services and afford them other avenues. But to that end, we still are very far behind because our bail guidelines are somewhat antiquated, even though they've been updated in certain areas. We have a hard time with the fact that we have not a lot of alternatives. We have monetary bail, we have diversion, we have early bail review, we have the option to reduce charges and get people out, and of course now we're looking at day reporting. But without viable alternatives, it's tough. So we leave a lot of the decisions open to the magistrates, and the only time that we really chime in is if there's a gun offense or an extraordinary flight risk where we'll ask for somebody's passport to be taken and maybe ask for an increase in bail, but that's where we are currently.
Mr. President, bail was started in feudal society over in some European country, mostly because they wanted to be able to assure people that were victimized would be compensated. It evolved to what we have now. And I just I'll hold off my second round of questioning for you, but again, reiterate the fact that we see you, and we see you for the professionals that you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
A couple of questions I wanted to just ask. Who manages the finances of the District Attorney's Office?
Well, you previously met Doreen Rooney, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and when I came on as Chief of Staff, I was on top of her in the chain of command just to monitor any fiscal responsibilities and administrative jobs that were needed and supervised.
Well, I don't say that in a negative way because your finances, your request of this year versus last year are pretty conservative compared to other departments, which is good.
Yes, thank you.
Let me ask you a question. On page 3 of your testimony, you mentioned an increase in Class 100 of $813,504 to support mandated union increases and to maintain current staffing levels.
Yes.
As far as non-union increases are concerned, are these increases performance-based?
We asked for additional, that $800,000 approximately, to offset the provisions for the contributions for the mandate for the pension funds. Any increase we give to any attorney in the office is performance-based.
Okay.
It is merit raises only at this point.
What is the starting salary today of a district attorney?
$51,965. $965. $51,965.
Call it 52, just to round it off.
There you go.
And so in your budget, the big book, section 38, page 5, you have 598 full-time employees, and you have, for fiscal 18, $47,518,000, an average of $80,000 per person. Does that sound right? How does that compare?
Yes, it's going to have a wide range within that.
And so how does that compare you? Because you mentioned that we are having a tough time keeping people in the department. Have we looked at other cities similar to Philadelphia to see where we stack up in relationship to salaries?
Well, realizing that half of our staff are attorneys. So you have a pocket that you have a group of individuals who are DC 47, DC 33, FOP members, both detectives and higher. Then you also have support staff and attorneys. So it's kind of hard to do that average of saying 80,000 because you're looking at a very wide range of individuals.
No, but you're also paying the new DAs 56,000, did you say?
52. About.
52, okay, and you said most people aren't staying more than 5 years. So I'm trying to understand, are we not paying enough? Or are we paying too much? Or how do we compare, this is the question, how do we compare to other cities of our size on the salaries we pay? I'll give you an example. I'm looking in the budget on page 7, and I don't understand this, but I'm asking the question. We pay the current district attorney $177,868. We pay 3 deputy district attorneys $170,000 each. In my way of thinking, I would think there's a bigger gap between those two positions, but I'm wondering, is that normal, or is that what we should be, looking at?
Well, the district attorney's salary is mandated by statute. He is $1,000 less than a CP judge. I'm sorry, so what is the...
So my question really is, when you're saying you're having trouble keeping people, how do our salaries stack up against other cities of our size? Have we looked at other cities to compare our salaries versus what other cities are paying?
You're asking about salaries, and we've done some work. I mean, York County, Pennsylvania has a salary for a starting DA that is significantly higher than ours. But then you compare it to Manhattan, and you have to do a lot of jig and jagging for cost of living and location. But if you look at the overall budget for violent crimes, so other similar cities with the crime the size of ours and the amount of ours, we have the lowest budget in the district attorney's office for any city across the country.
Would you have that information of other cities?
Yes, we have it in a chart we can hand to
Can
you.
you share it
We've
with
used it
us?
in previous years.
This body? Okay, thank you.
The one year we decided not to use that chart.
So here's my last question for this round. Have we had an external audit done that would help increase the effectiveness of the taxpayer dollars as it relates to programs, initiatives, procedure, and personnel costs? And do you agree that this would be a good idea, especially at this time?
I understand your question. I think with MacArthur, there is going to be more external audits done within that program itself, which does take into account a lot of our diversion programs to decide, are they working and are they worth the resources? An external audit, bring it on. We just need someone to pay for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, though, it's the investment of having the audit is well worth it because of the information. It's not in a critical way. It'll actually help you do your job better.
Agree 100%.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just quickly, first of all, I certainly concur with Councilman Jones. He said it much more eloquently than I would, but than I could. But he was, you folks you're doing a great job over there.
Thank you, sir.
But I just have one question, and it revolves around what you have up there with the chart. I was trying to figure out what you're trying to say with that.
With the indigent defense parity chart?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. We have talked a lot previous years, and we've gotten together with the Defenders Association, with the Law Department, to sort of put it out there on the table. Everyone's always asking for parity, and in previous years and this year, we agree there should be parity. It's just a question of how we figure out what the appropriate parity is. Basically, all criminal cases, the district attorneys are involved in every criminal case in Philadelphia, but the Defenders Association might not be involved in every single one. Maybe they're at about 60%, just throwing a number out there, because they also have, under the managing director's office, the the court-appointed counsel. So we want to put them in the formula. So the slides you see are just the starting point for a discussion on how to get to a formula that would be fair to determine what parity is.
Okay. I guess the reason I bring that up, and you didn't exactly say this today, but I know other years the DA has sort of openly argued against parity. Now, you didn't say that. I understand that. So I just wanted to make clear why you saying, because I never quite understood that argument. You know, I understand any department coming in here arguing for what they need. I guess I never understood arguing against somebody else getting something.
No, I'm not arguing against anyone not getting something. A good system, a good criminal justice system, appropriate dispositions in court requires good advocacy on both sides.
Okay. I think we all agree with that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Yeah, I'm going to have to echo the comments of my colleague and say justice works best when scales are balanced. Up at PCCD, this is not just a phenomenon here in Philadelphia, but all over the state. All of the defender associations make considerably less than, have smaller budgets than the district attorneys, and that doesn't seem quite fair. The second piece I would say is I would have to differ with my good friend and numbers guru, Councilman Dom, that the reason, like, by way of paying you too much, I have my legislative assistant, director here because of that disparity in part. Other than that, it's a great job over here.
You stole her away from us.
Yes, we sure did. And if you want to avoid other people from stealing, you have to compensate people. You guys come into this thing usually with $100,000 worth of debt based on your education loans and things like that, and to have to work that off and to keep competent professionals. From the guys in the barbershop, they know the guns over there, meaning folk that when you walk in the courtroom, you go, oh, let me take this deal now because there's going to be a problem, versus some of the newer ones that they say, no, we're going to take advantage of this one. And that longevity, that experience comes with being there. When I caught Sam at a weak moment, she had 2 files in boxes, carrying them behind her. And Sam, as you know her, is a happy-go-lucky kind of person, at least until she transforms into the prosecutor that roofs people. But you could see the stress of the number of cases on her face. So if we're going to have justice at its balance, I believe in both. The Defenders Association, in order to keep good, competent personnel, should be compensated. The district attorneys, who are the other side of that balance, should get so compensated as well. And I'm not pandering, but I do sincerely believe that. Take that up, hold my clock.
Yes.
Just a real quick point of
Chair
information.
recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you. One thing I did recognize since I've been in council, and I remember Seth doing his presentation last year, clearly there hasn't been a significant increase across the board for the district attorney's office. I think maybe the last two administrations. It's just been, I never understood it, even in private conversations, like, dude, what's going on? And actually had a public feud with the outgoing last mayor around how come he can't receive funds to expand his operation, do the work that we do. And so if we talk about compensation for high quality prosecutors to come and do their job, I mean, let's be real, part of that conversation needs to be when they put forth, and y'all put forth a budget request, whatever administration it is, respond to that request, because even when you look at this year, no increases, pretty much significant, pretty non-significant moving forward. And so I think that's like the 800-pound gorilla in the room that needs to be addressed. If y'all going to be effective with reforms that's going to be coming down the pipeline, but also still effectively doing your good job. Because I stole one of you guys, Joe Harris, over here is one of my policy
So
guys.
we stealing them.
He's doing an excellent job, but nevertheless, though, we're going to have a real conversation about it. Hopefully the next person isn't shy about, even if they aren't shy about advocating for additional funding, you have to have administration that says, you know what, and a council that's supportive of that increase. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman Don, were you trying to do a point of information? All right. I see you guys learning. Councilman,
He's
you
starting
learned
to know the moves.
how to jump the line, you know. It's all good. You've been here for more than a year, you know.
Councilman Jones.
Let's say it this for the record, so I can say point of information.
Point of information.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to clarify that my point isn't whether we're paying too little or too much. My point is that we don't know. And we need to look at other cities to see how they're operating, to see how we can retain our people and maybe pay them more or determine what we're doing. That was my only point. Thank you.
Councilman Jones, we will resume your clock, sir.
Thank you. Real quick, back to bail. How are the amounts of cash bail requested in the preliminary arraignments determined? How do you, that value of safety on bail? And then, how often are those determinations appealed by, to the masters about being too much? And last year, how many bail motions did your office file in the Court of Common Pleas? And for the record, Samantha did all these questions.
Before we get to the details, Councilman Jones and Johnson, I appreciate it. And on behalf of the 264 attorneys currently in the office, they'll be willing to take $1 million at any point in time to raise those salaries.
No problem.
Just send it on over. But as to the bail guidelines, I think Ms. Lobel has some information.
So we have a matrix. After someone's arrested, they go through pretrial services. They're assessed in many different ways. We look at their history. We look at their current crime. We look at the risk of flight. We look at where their living situation, if they need a monitor, if they have a home phone line, et cetera. And then we assign numbers to these factors, and we come up with a guideline matrix on our antiquated guidelines. And then we take that to the bail magistrate. And since, of course, we arraign so many people and we go through so many cases, the bail magistrate has a pretty good idea of how they're going to set bail. We recommend ROR on any case, release on their own recognizance on any case in which we're going to divert. Other than that, as I said before, unless it's a very serious case, a gun case, a focused deterrence defendant, we usually let the bail magistrates make that determination.
In your opinion, do they vary in, apples to apples comparisons? Does it vary? Is there a fluctuation? I see the body language there.
I think that we have the same magistrates for years. I think that they're pretty consistent. Almost all the cases in arraignment court are represented by the public defender's office, who do an excellent job of advocating for their clients. Every once in a while, you get private counsel come in and make an argument. We do have the remedy of an appeal, which I believe we use pretty infrequently.
Right, so 2016, a total of 33,000 cases were charged. We appealed at that level only 180 of them.
Okay. I'm going to pass the mic, Mr. Chair, and I'll come back around. Just a few other questions.
Okay, Councilman, thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
I'm going to be quick so we can wrap this up. This is along the lines of juvenile lifers and the resentencing process that's going on right now. And I know it was not too long ago, one of the newspapers talked about the district attorney's stance on the resentencing process. And so I want you to clarify what your position is. From my understanding, 75 of the 75 uncontested resentencing hearings have taken place in juvenile lifers cases without parole, and also there are 250 which are contested, which will require a significant amount of resources. And so I want to know what's the timeline for holding the hearings for the 250 that are contested, and how much resources have been allocated for FY18 to address these particular resentencing cases.
The allocation of resources was done by the city before we had a certain number for each year. It's approximately $250,000 for FY18. Just as background, Philadelphia has about 300 of the juvenile lifers without parole that needs to be resentencing. Some of your numbers, I believe I have the most recent numbers. Total, let me just back up. Every single case of those 300 is looked at individually. We have assigned approximately 5 attorneys and detectives and victim witness people to go through the protocol that was established by Deputy District Attorney Delaney. It's culling the file, finding it, locating it, then doing extensive work to locate the family of the victim who, we're talking years and years, decades, could be lost. Advocating with them with the help of victim witness coordinators to reignite a horrible trauma that they had to go through, working them through that process, and then ordering the adjustments from the DOC, the Department of Corrections, how they've been doing in jail for the last 20, 40, 50 years, culling through those boxes and boxes of evidence and information. looking through the facts of each case individually. Only after looking at all those facts is a determination made individually on what is the appropriate sentence for that individual. We are using the current statute as a guideline, and a guideline only. To date, we have given 115 offers. Of those 115 offers, 81 are immediately eligible for parole. Only 34 are not immediately eligible for parole. We have, so far, 65 have been resentenced by agreement. 3 are pending resentencing by agreement. Only 15 of those offers have been rejected. Only 15. And we're waiting for, acknowledgement on 27 others, whether they accept it or reject it. And the next contested hearing is, May 17th. So we're continuing to work on what will be a long process, but we're doing it diligently, efficaciously, and individually.
And as I wrap up, I just want to again thank you for highlighting the part that the victim's family plays in this whole process. And I go up to Greater Florida, I do a lot of work with the lifers, but I also explain that on the opposite side, right? I understand people deserve a second chance. I believe in that. But also take in consideration there is another family who has been impacted by violence that has to be a part of this conversation. And that's that balance. Because, again, I spend a significant amount of my time just Saturday. I go to church on Saturday, but the first thing I had to do 9 o'clock in the morning, speak at a funeral, a young man that was murdered in South Philadelphia, console the family as a result of some senseless gun violence. And the reality is you got 2 families warring over a murder that took place 20 years ago. And so as time goes along, if a family doesn't heal, you're bringing up, a tragedy in the situation. So that's the other part about this is a law enforcement position. And I just want to acknowledge you for your hard work and tell y'all, keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones for wrap-up.
For wrap-up. Got it. Got it, Mr. Chairman. Understood. Ken, I would just quickly echo a couple of things that you can be mindful of. When people want to come forth and be witnesses, we can't come to their house in the neighborhood and show up at their door in the big police van or city car. People know those things a mile away. We have to be a little more strategic in where we meet people, how we contact them, because it puts them at risk. In some of these impacted neighborhoods, it's 2 streets over and you both share the convenience store. So we have to really be mindful of that. My final question, Mr. Chairman, is since in 2014 we passed the legislation to decriminalize possession of small amounts of marijuana, how has that impacted your world?
Well, I have some statistics on our small amount of marijuana program, which is still in place. In 2016, we sent 865 people to the SAM program as compared to in 2013 where we sent 3,190. The reason that we still send people to the SAM program is that we tend to distinguish between, as I said before, treating possession or use of marijuana as a social problem or an addiction, if you want to call it that, compared to people who buy marijuana when sellers have set up open-air street sales or used cars or buildings to sell marijuana. So when people are arrested as a buyer, we tend to send them to the program. We have found an excellent success rate, better success rate, following an arrest in completing the SAM program, and they're still eligible for expungement than when we were diverting them directly to SAM without an arrest. So if somebody's creating a disturbance in the neighborhood, if there are street sales in the neighborhood and that person's arrested, we send them to the program. It's been quite successful, and otherwise we'll divert them and give them treatment as we would any addict or anybody who has a social concern. So we found that it's been very helpful to us and to the community to make that distinction.
Okay, so our prosecutions are down. That gives way to move other people into a more expedited trial and prosecution scenario. So we're moving people and paperwork out of the way and then making room for people who actually deserve that. With that, I'm going to end with what I started with. We see you, and you're a part of our partnership and valued members of it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, and
I don't see any further questions from council. I want to thank you all for your testimony, and, to end with, the district attorney really does a tremendous amount of good for our city of Philadelphia, and, we thank you for all your service, especially under, the caseloads that you have and circumstances that you were presented on a daily basis. So thank you for coming in, and thank you for your time. And this will conclude our district attorney's testimony and hearing for today. We will report back at 2 o'clock for law department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a village approach.